Baby, we got a problem. We might have to stop the war.
What? But we've already been...
I know, man, I know, but something happened that we did not anticipate.
Well, how? We've infiltrated every single aspect of...
Because they waited days to do it, man. Days. They really caught us napping this time.
Pull yourself together, Donald. Talk to me.
I don't know how to say this, BB, but there's been a statement of utmost concern from the Europeans.
Those bottle caps better be attached to the missiles, Donald.
They're like, Monsieur President, you violated the Ayatollah's data privacy.
Your aircraft carriers are rated C- for energy efficiency.
I'm screaming. Boy, we could go on for weeks like this.
Oh, we will.
Weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tabitha Hassell with Tabs on Tap. Hopefully you guys are having a great morning today. I wasn't here yesterday or the day before. Duty does call sometimes, and I just got to get away in the mornings. But I hope you're all having a good day. The streaming service I've used, they've made some changes, and it's kind of funny. I just popped it up this morning. I'm like, none of this looks normal. So hopefully I can find everything and see everything like normal. I'll tell you, I woke up to some kind of sobering information. We're at Defcon 2. If you know what the Defcon system is, 1 through 5, both in Central Command and Southern Command. Now, I haven't checked it in the past couple minutes. I expect it to go back down to a 3, but still, Defcon 2. We've only been at Defcon 2 once in the history of the Defcon system, and that was back in 1962 during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. So it's a pretty significant rise, don't you think? Well, I remember the other day, good morning, Sherry. Colonel Joe Adams had sent me a message, and he's like, hey, we're at Defcon 3. And I thought, well, man, that's crazy. And now here we are today, Defcon 2. I don't know how long that's going to last. The reason why I believe it's at a Defcon 2 is because the IDF did strike a nuclear facility in Iran, and they were concerned about nuclear fallout. So it does not mean that a nuclear strike is imminent, nothing along those lines. I do expect them to move it down to a Defcon 3. That'll probably, if it hasn't already happened, it'll probably happen at any time. But still, Defcon 3, that's up there too, and something to keep an eye on. I don't think we're going to have a nuclear strike. That's really the least of my concerns. We're going to talk about some other things today, because I do kind of feel, and I'm not fear-mongering or anything like that, but I think it's time to start thinking about some preparations. There's a lot of things going on. We have the Strait of Hormuz, which is still primarily closed. Yes, we're getting a couple boats through here and there, ships through, but they're being attacked as they come through. And we're going to get into that and why that could potentially be a concern. Good morning, Karen. Good morning, Kim. Hopefully you are all having a fantastic morning. Lots to talk about today. I want to talk about all of that. We're going to talk about, of course, Bill Clinton and his testimony. I mean, did he clear Donald Trump? Sure sounds like it to me. Matter of fact, not only did he clear Donald Trump, he went out of his way to do so. We're going to play that clip here shortly. We're going to talk about the not just the supreme leader Ayatollah, excuse me, the Grand Ayatollah has called a fatwa on Donald Trump, the United States, and anyone that helps us. So we're certainly going to talk about that. And quite honestly, it's, is it a laughing matter? Is it not? I don't know. And, maybe, who knows, maybe Colonel Joe Adams will jump in with us tomorrow, because we're heading into, another day. There's already airstrikes taking place today. But I want to talk about propaganda. Every time I post something, it's so frustrating to me. I'm to the point now where I'm like, I don't even want to post anymore because I'm so aggravated with people. And not all people, but some people. But every time I post something on social media, everybody's like, propaganda, that's propaganda. No, you know what? Not everything is propaganda. It's not all propaganda. Trust me, it's not. I wish it were. It's not all propaganda. And yes, we are in a very critical phase here in the United States. And I don't care who gets upset with me. If you want to get upset with me, that's fine. It makes no difference to me, because I'm here to tell you the truth either way. And the fact is yes, we are short on missile interceptors. We certainly are. We're short on missiles. Our air bases have been destroyed. And yes, people on the news and people in social media, people even in our military, including our president, obviously they've got a strategy that they have to protect the of course, national security. So they're going to say, of course, it's not true. We've got missiles for days. We could carry on the longest war on the planet. But the fact is, it's not true. It's called gaslighting. It's not true. Part of a strategic plan. And you know me, I support Donald Trump wholeheartedly. But at the same time, I'm going to tell you the truth. We're in a very precarious situation. And thankfully, we're getting a little help from our friends. And believe it or not, that might even include Canada. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about false flags because I think we're seeing maybe some false flags taking place in our favor, but bound to happen. I want to talk just the tiniest bit again about preparing for an emergency, of course, and we're going to talk about some various economies. I think our economy right now is fine. Good morning, Rob. I think right now our economy is fine, but there's several Middle Eastern countries whose economy is not going to be fine. China has stopped exporting all diesel products, all fuel products. I don't know if you recall, but there was a time, I guess it was probably a couple of years ago, when they were having an issue with what was it? Coal production. And of course, they need coal to produce DEF, which of course we need for our over the road trucks for any diesel truck. And they export the DEF to South Korea. And there was a very critical point with South Korea where China had stopped exporting the DEF. And South Korea said, hey, we are 1 week from absolute economic collapse. 1 week. Because as soon as our trucks are stopped on the side of the road because they can no longer drive without that DEF, then guess what's going to happen? And that's the diesel exhaust fluid, of course. What's going to happen? Their entire economy is going to shut down. And that's not going to happen here. I'm not concerned about that happening here in the United States. Drew, what does Drew have to say? We're not getting help with these high gas prices. Are you kidding? Our economy stinks. Well, the economy has been bad for a long time now. Nothing new there, is it? Is that anything new that the economy is not great? Much better than what it was under the Biden administration, no question about it. Back again to people blasting me on social media. Last week, I was doing this as a favor to people, okay? Not that other people didn't see this coming, but I'm like, hey, go out and fill your tank up with gas because guess what? Gas prices are getting ready to go up. We're looking at crude oil per barrel, the Brent price going up to $200 per barrel is what it's expected to get to. People say, well, that doesn't affect us. That doesn't affect us because we have our own oil. Okay, well, the gas station down the road from me, where I normally get gas for about $2.30, is up to $4.39 yesterday. So, yes, maybe it's price gouging. It probably is price gouging. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's price gouging. It doesn't matter if it's because of the impact of, in the oil situation. Gas stations are going to price gouge. We already know that's going to happen. So, therefore, it still stands. Get gas while you can. I did. I filled up my gas tank because I thought, I go through gas pretty quick, sometimes a gas tank per day. So does it really matter in the end? I don't know. But for some of you who don't drive as much, yeah, get your gasoline now because guess what? It is going to continue to go up. Now, unless Donald Trump stands in front of the big screen and he threatens, these different gas stations and the owners of these gas stations, and he says, hey, we're going to come out and prosecute you if you're price gouging. We're probably going to see those prices to continue. And Jay says gas companies are going to take full advantage of us. They sure are. And Mr. Parnell, OPEC sets the prices. Well, then Mr. Trump better get on to OPEC because you know what? We're facing some problems here. We're facing some problems. There's a lot of countries in the Middle East who are facing some, serious issues with their economy because what's happening, and of course, this is my layman's term of how I understand it to be, is that there are all of these fuel tankers trying to get through the Strait of Hormuz. They're not able to get through. Yes, we're trying to escort a couple through here and there, but that's not good enough. It's just not good enough. So what's happening is you go out to these big oil fields and they're at capacity. From what I have read and what I understand is that typically they fill their reserves up to about 80%, not 100%. They're usually at 80%. And people are saying, hey, they're at capacity already. They're already at 80%. They're not going to damage their tanks to try to fill it to 100%. They're already at 80%. And therefore, they have already started to stop production of oil. In Iraq, they've stopped production of oil in some areas, and it's going to start happening everywhere because they don't have anywhere to put it. How can you keep producing oil and have nowhere to put it? Your strategic reserves are full. There's nowhere for this oil to go, so you have to stop production. And what happens when you stop production? It causes economies to fail. What happens on the other side of that? All of these different Middle Eastern countries who are counting on that oil to come through the Strait of Hormuz, and it's not happening. They're coming up with some ideas, I'll tell you that. Russia has already been talking early this morning, as was, I believe it was Saudi Arabia, if I'm correct, Saudi Arabia. And they're saying, hey, we're not going to let this happen. This war could continue for a very long time. There's a lot of people who think this could continue for quite some time. And we're going to get into why that could possibly be here shortly, and how that's kind of looking out with some of our European allies coming to our rescue. And it is to our rescue. We're going to talk about that too, because we do need some rescuing right now, whether you like it or not. That's just a fact of the precursor, right, from the Biden administration. And good morning, Scott. And Mr. Parnell says, I heard this morning 200 cargo ships are anchored in the Middle East. I'm sure, because it's not just oil that's not getting through. It's a lot of other things too. Jay says, which is the excuse they gave us for why it takes gas prices so long to drop. And it's all just a lie. And let me see if I can move up here. Jay says, Trump has said he will escort tankers. Let's see here with our Navy. Yeah. And I believe there's a couple coming through, but Iran attacks just about anything that's coming through that area. Good morning, Phyllis. And let's see here. Jay says the gas we are buying now was bought and paid for when oil was cheap, not current market. Yep. But Jay, as we know, that does not stop the price gouging, because as you said earlier, they're going to take full advantage. And Lori says Drew's right. Economy feels terrible, but one of his campaign promises, it's not just about eggs. That's right. And we've got a long way to go, don't we, on the economy? And I think we're going to get there, but we've got a long way to go. And good morning, Nancy. Almost Friday. Nancy, I feel like it's Friday, I guess, because I wasn't here the past couple days, but I do feel like it's Friday already today, except for it's not, because I have to go to work after the show. Well, I work on Friday too, so it doesn't really matter. But anyway, Russia, Saudi Arabia already talking about strategy. They're saying, hey, we can't handle this. We need that oil. We need to build pipelines. We need to be able to figure out a way around the Strait of Hormuz. Now, of course, that's going to take them a very long time to build those pipelines. Maybe that's not going to help them in this particular conflict. I don't expect it to last quite that long, not long enough to build a pipeline, but they're thinking about building a pipeline that goes down to the south and totally avoids that whole Strait of Hormuz area, because it doesn't matter who controls it. That's a lot of leverage someone has right now. Iran has that leverage. We don't. Israel doesn't. That's all on Iran. And they've already destroyed, I lost count. Is it 11, 14? I can't remember how many cargo ships in that area that they've destroyed. And there's been a couple that have come through, and they've attacked a couple as well, trying to get through. So I'm not sure how well that's going to work. We've already had injuries on some of those oil tankers coming through the strait there, or attempting to come through the strait. So I think they're probably all a little nervous about even trying to get through. And we, the United States and Israel, we can't worry about that right now. We've got a lot of other things, on our hands. And you may or may not like the situation. You may or may not like the situation, but the situation is we're in a very precarious situation in the Middle East. And it's okay. You can fill the comment line saying propaganda, propaganda. I'm here to tell you, you don't have to agree with me. It's not propaganda. Why am I saying it's not propaganda? Because we have been talking about this. If you have watched this show, I have been talking about this for years. I've been talking about it for years, about U.S. stockpiles. How many times have we talked on this show where we're at with the stockpiles? That's not propaganda. It's been this way for a long time. We all know that under the Biden administration, guess what happened under the Biden administration? If you recall, under the Biden administration, they defunded, we'll use that word, defunded the Defense Department. We were not making a lot of missiles or missile interceptors during that time. And the ones we were making, what were they doing? They were giving them to Ukraine. Remember? They were giving them to Ukraine, which is kind of interesting because that's about to come full circle, for us. So, yes, I understand Donald Trump standing on a stage saying, "No, we're fine. We've got missiles for days. We'll be, we could carry this war on indefinitely." That's just not true. Iran knows it's not true. Just the same way that we have spies in Iran. Iran has spies in our government. Iran understands what our supply is as much as we understand what their supply is. So each side knows what the other side has for the most part. And of course, you're seeing we're not concentrating on the Strait of Hormuz. What we're concentrating on is destroying the thousands of Iranian missiles, the thousands of, they probably don't have thousands left anymore, but the thousands of, they still do have thousands of drones. We're trying to get to their drones. We've destroyed a lot of their drones and their missiles, but we've got a long way to go. And that's our number one goal. Now, see, Iran wised up and they're like, all right, United States and Israel. Israel's on shorter supply than we are here in the United States. And Iran is like, hey, we're saving the best stuff for last. We're going to save the best stuff for last. We're going to keep throwing these drones out to you. We're manufacturing these drones while we're throwing them up into the air at you, like little paper airplanes. And we're going to let you continue to use your missiles to shoot them down so you don't have any missiles anymore. And then guess what? We're going to lob the big stuff at you. Their missile, I think I heard yesterday it was down their missile launches by 86%. And now you could say that that's because they're on short supply, and who knows, maybe they are. But I think most people in the know believe that's not the case. They believe that they're just waiting. They're just waiting. They're just going to keep launching those drones because they have so many of them. While we're sitting around under the Joe Biden administration, worrying about transgenders in the military and not getting those rare earth minerals, not procuring those rare earth minerals, not making the same deals that Donald Trump is making, not producing missiles, not producing interceptors, but giving every single thing we have to Ukraine, we became a weaker military. So I don't want to hear anything about propaganda because we all know and we all talked about it nonstop while Biden was president that our military was weak. Our borders were weak, all with intent. This is exactly what Democrats in Congress wants. It's exactly what the deep state wants. It's exactly what the Biden administration want. They want us to be weak, right? That's exactly what they want, and they have got their way. Let me backtrack here to some comments, and we're going to talk about how our friends are coming to our rescue. And Drew, Russia is happy about the oil price. Yeah, probably. They're talking about they're going to be restricting their oil from Europe, is what Putin is saying. Jay says, we will be controlling it shortly. We better be, Jay. We better be for our own good and everybody else's. Mr. Parnot, newly born calves are selling $2,200 right now. That definitely tells the market is rough and going to be bad. I went to the grocery store yesterday and I wasn't looking for steak. I was actually just getting a whole chicken because I'm going to make some homemade like chicken noodle soup, a low carb version. And I bought a whole chicken. And I just happened to walk past the meat aisle and I saw the price of steaks. I'm like, every time I look, higher, higher, and higher. It's insane. Another market that's just out of control. Jay says insurance companies are refusing to cover tankers sailing the strait currently, but that's the biggest issue. Well, that would make sense. I heard that there were some insurance problems. Paul says, why aren't we controlling the strait with our military? I'm getting ready to tell you, Paul. I am getting ready to tell you. Linda says, good morning. Good morning, Linda. And let's see here. Jay says, I think you're greatly underestimating our ability and overestimating Iran's capabilities. Jay, you've been telling me that for a very long time now. And Drew says the United States are shooting $1 million missiles to take down $20,000 drones. Now, what kind of sense does that make? And you're Drew. It's not often you're right, but you are right. And Jay, here's the thing. I don't think I'm underestimating our ability. I think we have the best military in the world. I've always believed that, and I'll continue to believe that. And it's highly unfortunate we've lost 6 service members. I strongly believe the number's much higher than 6. How many times? Gosh, I can remember on this show. I don't know if I was. I don't think it was. I think it was before this podcast because not a lot's happened since in the year and a half or so I've had this podcast. I don't remember what radio show I was on, but I remember at one time we were same thing, lobbying these strikes back and forth with Iran. It wasn't in that 12-day war. This was quite some time ago. And I can remember them hitting, I'm almost positive it was one of our bases in Baghdad. I'm pretty sure. I can't be 100% on that. And, of course, our government came out and said, oh, everything's good, no casualties, no problem. Everything's fine. A month or 2 months later, all of a sudden we're hearing all these reports that no, everything actually wasn't fine. Well, we didn't have any deaths, troops that were killed in those airstrikes. We did have a lot of troops that were severely injured with very severe concussions, but they didn't tell us that at the time. We found out much later, and that's okay. That's common. It's just part of strategy. It is what it is. But I do think that where, how they say when there's smoke, there's fire. When you have people on the ground, what do you think happens when a missile, hit, if it hit in my front yard right now, or let's just say it hit my house? What do you think would happen? All the people who live around me would be over here and they would see me probably strewn out across my front yard, injured, dead, who knows? And they would start talking about it, wouldn't they? And the news would spread pretty quickly. And that's what's happening in any kind of war situation. These people on the ground, they're there in an instant. You saw what it was like when the female pilot, remember, and the guy, the one pilot, we've seen the videos of that so much, from that Kuwaiti friendly fire strike. How many people were there like the second they landed? And that's how it is. And so when you see these reports coming out from these different areas, and they're saying, no, there are American casualties. There are, we've seen them, this and this. There's rumors of, photos spreading. And then somebody online was like, oh, that military base has been evacuated. I'm like, well, I know it's not evacuated because I have video. Because guess what? Everybody has a video camera now, don't they? Everybody has a phone that takes video. I have a video of some of our troops in Bahrain making a run for it, crossing over a fence, hiding out behind a berm of some type, trying to see what's going on. And I'm not saying any of them were killed or even injured. I didn't see anything like that, but I know that base was not fully evacuated because I saw it with my own eyes. It wasn't AI. And there's a lot going on. And you can't expect the government to tell you everything because that puts them even more at risk. Donald Trump can't stand up on a stage and say, hey, Americans, sorry, even though it was under the Biden administration, we're short supply of missiles. We're in short supply of interceptors. We gave everything we had to Ukraine. Well, guess what? Ukraine's giving it back. So Donald Trump, I don't care if you believe me or don't believe me, I'm going to tell you that it's the truth. And you're going to see evidence that it's the truth, even though they'll tell you it's not the truth. And this is me saying this, a full Donald Trump supporter. I support our actions in Iran. I think this was the right move. I know a lot of people may not agree with that. I think this is something we had to do. Maybe the timing wasn't the best, but we had to do it. I think it should have happened 8 weeks ago. It took a little longer than I had hoped or had planned for. So I'm saying this not to be critical of the Trump administration, because this is not at fault of the Trump administration. This is at fault of the Biden administration. But we have Donald Trump who's gone around to all of our allies and said, hey, we need your help. Our military bases have been destroyed. We're short on missiles, we're short on interceptors, and we need as much help as we can get. And that's what this fallout with Spain, because Spain said, we're not letting you use our bases. Not going to happen. Just not going to happen. We have France who stepped up and said, okay, you can use our bases. So we're going to be using France's military bases over across the Middle East. And not that we can't use any portion of ours. I'm not saying they're not there anymore. They've been flattened or leveled. But, Iran and their airstrikes were very precise at some of these bases where they were hitting the runways where people, of course, land and take off, which has caused some serious problems. And we have Ukraine, who has announced that they're going to give us some type of drone defense system that they've used in the battle with Russia, because we're having such a problem with drones. And so that way we don't have to use our missiles. We can use their drone defense system instead of using those precious missiles that we have. We're going to be using their drone defense system. So they've stepped up. We have Italy, who is going to be giving us some missile interceptors. So Italy, Giorgia Meloni, our good friend, has stepped up, and they're going to help us out. Canada has pledged, hey, if we need them, they're going to be here for us when the time is right. So we've got our Canadian friends, helping out. We've got Greece today is mobilizing. Let me think. Greece, I know they're bringing some type of a destroyer into Cyprus, from what I understand, to kind of guard that area, not necessarily directly, involved in this conflict, but they're also on the ready because they also don't want to be attacked. We have Saudi Arabia stepping up. They're going to, I don't know what they're going to do, but they're going to do something. Qatar has already struck Iran. And these countries are tired of this situation. We had NATO that had to strike down a Iranian missile, except for that, guess what? Everybody's saying it's not an Iranian missile. They're saying it's a false flag. As a matter of fact, it's kind of interesting. But the EU, I've got a video, as a matter of fact, I'll play for you about this because I know you guys won't take my word for it. Let's see here. Let me backtrack on comments. But you're going to see these things playing out. You're going to see them playing out. And let's see here. Let me go backwards. Okay, Jay, no base is fully evacuated. Only non-essential personnel will be relocated. Exactly, Jay. Yet I have people telling me, oh, the bases are all empty. There's nobody even there. No, there's people there, and they're getting hammered by these Iranian missiles and drones. Brian says a lot of interceptors and missiles were used during the 12-day war. Yes, that's right. It wasn't just Ukraine. You got that right, Brian. Thank you for adding that in. Jay says, the plan has been in the works, so it's likely production was stepped up here. Well, production has been stepped up. If you recall, Donald Trump campaigned. As a matter of fact, I know he campaigned on building up our defenses because guess what? I was one of those campaign people out there working, as you know, some of you know, for Elon Musk for his America PAC. I was out, as you guys all know, I've said it so many times, in Georgia for those 42 days. And I had a bazillion leaflets and pamphlets, still have a bazillion leaflets and pamphlets that say, guess what? Donald Trump is going to secure our borders, and he's going to ramp up military production. We know that since Donald Trump has been president, he has procured rare earth minerals. He's worked out deals with various countries for those rare earth minerals. We're even, potentially going to mine for rare earth minerals right here in the United States. So, and we know on day one, he said, hey, we're funding. Joe Biden took away funding from the Defense Department. Donald Trump said, hey, we've got to ramp up. If you go back and you look at the videos from back then, you will hear Donald Trump say at the time how weak our military was at that time under Joe Biden. They were very slow at producing a whole lot of anything. And so therefore, he was very concerned that you can go back and watch those videos where Donald Trump says, yeah, we're in a bad place. We are in a bad place. If we were to go to war, we're in a bad place. So we've got to elect Donald Trump and get him into office so he can ramp up military production, get the funding where it needs to go. That's the first thing he did when he stepped into office, is ramped up production of, guess what, missiles. And, so yeah, we did ramp up the production, but that doesn't mean we have enough to sustain us for a very long time. Now, we're going to be fine. Nobody should panic over that because we will be absolutely fine. We will be successful in this mission. And let's see here. And then Layla says, responding to Drew Collins, perfect sense. Iran had a mass quantity of weapons. Hell, Obama gave them U.S. weapons. Yes, they did, along with a pallet full of cash, lots of them. Did you know Iran had that vast of a navy? Most people didn't. Layla. And trust me, they have been building this for almost 50 years with help from China, Russia, and the U.S. Thanks, Democrats. Man, Layla, you have got that right. You are spot on. Iran has had nothing to do but spend their time building up their military arsenal. And I've talked about that so many times on my various shows. I probably have a bazillion videos talking about Iran. And my position on Iran is not changed now from what it's always been. My position on Iran was always that they're big yappers, like little chihuahuas. They like to yap a lot. They have proxies. I am one person who will not talk about their proxies, because guess what? They use proxies to do their dirty work. We, the United States, we do also. A lot of people consider us, the United States, the terrorists of the world. Of course, the term terrorist is certainly subjective, isn't it? Depending on who you are and where you live and what you're fighting for. But a lot of people think of the United States as their world terrorist with all of our proxies. So we have proxies. We can't really complain about Iran and their proxies. But here's the thing: is Iran has had nothing to do but build these missiles. They've had nothing to do but build these drones. I don't know. They estimate 80,000 of these drones. I would have a very hard time believing that they have 80,000 drones. But guess what? They've had a long time to build them. They're cheaply made. They're very cheaply made, and they have a very big production facility. So it's certainly possible that they have thousands. I don't know about 80,000, but it's possible they have thousands. But we're at a situation right now. You're going to see this playing out before your eyes, and you're going to say, okay, I see it. Our friends are coming to help us, because we do need the help. We do. We need the help. And I don't think that this situation is, I'm going to stop myself for a second. I'm going to say that I was going to say that I don't see the situation ending anytime soon, but there's also a lot of talk about Iran reaching out to the Trump administration, trying to work out a ceasefire. They're claiming that they will halt all production of anything, nuclear related. And from what I understand, I don't have any way to prove this, but from what I understand, Netanyahu was not happy about this. There's a lot of sources behind the scenes who talk about these things. And it's my understanding that Netanyahu contacted Donald Trump and said, hey, what's going on? I'm hearing that you have a contact in your administration that's talking to Iran, and you guys are talking about a potential ceasefire. I don't want a ceasefire. That's not the route we're planning on going. We're not done yet. And Trump allegedly checked sources and said, no, that's not true. We don't have anyone. We're not talking to Iran. There's no ceasefire being planned, but I do know it's true that Iran wants a ceasefire. They do, are going to try to do whatever they can, but that's Iran. Iran has not attacked another country outside of proxies since the Ottoman Empire. It's been a very long time. They're generally not aggressive in that way, but they're terrible to their own people. They have a lot of leverage over a lot of countries, because we don't always know what they have. And of course, they have their allies to back them up, which is, of course, China and Russia. And I think we've said many times before, Iran, they're not just some little Islamic country that's not ready to go to war. They've just done a very good job at holding back in the past. They were always retaliatory in nature. If you struck them, it's kind of always been a tit for tat. If you strike them, they're going to strike you back. If you make threats for them, they're going to threaten you. If you kill one of their people, they're going to fire a strike. But if you guys recall, I don't know if it was during that 12-day war, if it was a different time, but there was a situation, and we all knew it. We talked about it on this show, where we did something. I can't remember what we did. We probably killed somebody, some of their people. I don't know. But something that we did. And Iran said, hey, we have to strike you back. And the big deal is that Iran had reached out to the White House and told the Trump administration that we've got to save face. You did this to us. We have no choice but to strike you back. And then they made a plan to strike some facility of ours that we didn't care about anyway, but it was just to save face. But this war here, this is a different situation. Iran has gone off the deep end. Whenever those protesters in Iran started rising up and they were just killing them by the thousands, I absolutely do believe that's true. They were killing them by the thousands. I do believe it's true. Some people might say it's propaganda. I think it's true. And that's just my personal opinion on it. And I think that they're getting what they deserve. And I hope they get a lot more of what they deserve. Not only that, but it is true. We cannot allow them to have a nuclear weapon, because I don't think they would ever use it against us. But I do think that they would, now they might in a situation like we're facing right now, but I do think that Iran would absolutely hold it over us, and they would absolutely threaten us with it. And we would really be in a very bad spot if Iran had a nuclear weapon and they continuously threatened us with that nuclear weapon. We don't want, and we can't allow that to happen, of course. And then, of course, like we talked about last week before this, I don't know if it was last week, maybe last Monday. It was before this conflict began, before the first airstrikes began, that there's a lot of reports out there that Iran was building a new long range missile that could reach the United States. That was their goal. Because obviously, of course, that would be their goal, wouldn't it? For them to be able to reach the United States. And nobody has said that that's the reason why we've done this. As a matter of fact, I don't even know the reason. Do you? I don't even know the reason why we did this. I've been trying to figure it out myself because we had Marco Rubio who said, well, we did this because it's what Israel wanted us to do. And I mean, that's what he said, didn't he? And then Trump says, no, that's not true. That's not true. We kind of forced Israel into doing this. It's about nuclear weapons. I don't know. I don't even know what it's about, quite honestly. I think it needs to be done. I don't know that it's actually about. And you know what, Jay, you're right. You're absolutely right. Iran is making a lot of additional enemies in the Middle East. You got that right. And let's see, Leila, we just have to be careful because there's so many false videos and AI generated videos. You just don't know if it's real. You're right, Leila. We don't know. And you know, and I've seen those too. I posted a video the other day of the cluster bomb attack that took place in Tel Aviv, and everybody's like, "Oh, that's AI, that's AI," and maybe it was. I was told it was not AI, but maybe it was AI. But it didn't matter because Iran actually did fire a cluster warhead at Tel Aviv and did hit a residential area, you know, and I think you all understand by now how Israel is. They don't, you know, and I understand it's for strategic purposes. They don't want the enemy to know maybe where their weak spots are. They don't want the enemy to rejoice when they have casualties. But Israel is very funny about that. If there's any airstrikes in their country, they do not want anyone to know. They will take your camera from you. They'll take your phone away from you and say, nope, you're not going to broadcast that. We don't want that to be shown. But again, strategically, that's a very valid point that they have in not showing that. But Iran is absolutely using cluster munitions. We know they are. We've got countless videos of them doing it. You know, so whether or not that one particular video was an AI version, I don't know. And it didn't matter because it still happened one way or the other. There's even a video that I didn't share of a reporter on the ground at the site where that actually hit, you know, talking about the cluster munitions, which is, of course, against the Geneva Convention, but everybody does it anyway now, don't they? And let's see. Jay says Iranian missiles have dropped roughly 80% since start. 86%, Jay. I don't know if you heard us talking about that a moment ago. There's a lot of talk about why Iranian missiles, the launches have reduced. Now, some people say, well, they're out of missiles and they're saving, you know, what little they have for when they really need it. Then there's a lot of other people who say, well, they know they might not be launching missiles, but they are launching a lot of drones. And a lot of people think they're trying to deplete our missiles by launching those drones. And then once they've depleted what missiles we have, or at least most of them, then they're going to start another campaign and start launching the big stuff at us. They haven't launched any of the real big stuff yet. A couple big things, but they've got a lot more than that. I do know that. And, you know, I think when we started this conflict, and again, people will say propaganda, propaganda. I have been tracking Iran's stockpile of weapons for probably 20 years. And I do absolutely believe that they probably had around that 3,000 mark, which a lot of other people seem to believe as well, when this conflict started. We don't know how many we do know how many the United States have. I'm just going to keep that number to myself. And and let's see, Leela says, the truth factor is Republicans build up our military, the Democrats tear it down, or they basically give it away to our enemies. It is absolutely a fact, Layla. And that's why we're in the position that we're in now. And that's why I get so frustrated when my fellow conservatives tell me it's propaganda when I say that our military, they're not weak because of the people themselves fighting in the military. We've got some beyond fantastic service members out there fighting, you know, for this country, fighting literally with their lives for this country. They are fantastic. We've got great leadership in our military at this time, but we are weak in the sense that we stop production of a lot of things. I remember under the Biden administration at one point talking about how the fuel reserves, I can't remember the guest. I had a guest come on. I don't remember which radio show I was on at the time, but we had a guest come on and they were talking about the oil reserves for our military. And they said, you know, we don't have the oil, or not oil reserves, sorry, gasoline reserves, fuel reserves for the jets. Or like, we don't even have enough, fuel to carry out a really big mission. We're just the at the time, I think it was maybe Obama. I can't remember. It wasn't Biden. This was before Biden's time, but they were saying that, our reserves are low. They were low back then. Donald Trump built them up. Biden gave them all away to Ukraine and stopped making things. So that's why we're in the position that we're in there. Like it or not, it's not propaganda. And us conservatives, man, we talked about this all the time when Biden was the president. We talked about it all the time. And I guess everybody has forgotten that. And Jay says, once that site is used to launch, it's dead because they can track it and eliminate it within minutes. Yes. And we've got to do a little bit more of that eliminating for on the Iran side, that is. Brian says, anything to say about our troops being told that Trump was, oh, yes, Brian. I wasn't planning on talking about that, but I'm glad you brought it up. Brian, I don't know if that's true or not. I'm just going to kind of tell everybody the story as I have heard it. Now, allegedly, I'm going to say allegedly because I've heard this. I can't prove it to be true. You can go out online and look this up. Allegedly, there are a lot of military commanders in our various branches of service who are telling all of their subordinates that we are doing this because, and Brian, correct me if I might not be saying this exactly right, that are for religious purposes, because this was prophesized in the Bible that we take out Iran, us in Israel, that we take out Iran, and that we're doing this with the intent of bringing Jesus back for, I don't know, Brian, I might need your help here. Telling them that, let me get this straight. They're telling their subordinates that this is all biblical, that we're acting biblically, that Trump is our chosen one or something along those lines. I can't recall the word they used for Donald Trump, but we're bringing this to bring out the prophecy of Armageddon. And they're literally using the word Armageddon, that we are trying to get to that point in the Bible where Jesus returns. And I don't know if it's true. I don't know if it's not true. Allegedly, there's a guy out there who has several military members coming forward saying, hey, our commanders are telling us that we're heading into this war to reach Armageddon because the Bible predicted this is what would happen. And Donald Trump is going to lead us into Armageddon, into the return of Jesus Christ. Now, I don't know if that's true, but that is the word on the street. And I'm hearing it from an awful lot of people. So maybe we'll talk more about that tomorrow. I just read about that this morning, so I haven't had time to study up on that. Jay says, according to the Pentagon, Iran has 0 Navy ships left. That's probably true. I've got a nice video here of some of our good work. Let's take a look. That's pretty wild, isn't it? This was a declassified file there. Some of our handiwork right there in front of your eyes. And we allegedly used a submarine to sink one of their ships, I think, yesterday. And we're hearing that they lost 80 lives. I always hate to hear about casualties of war. That's always, of course, the downside. I'm trying to scan my comments down, but my little comment scanner thing doesn't always work. And Jay says Iran had their chance. Jay, how much? We know that Trump tried to give them diplomacy, and more diplomacy. Oh, here you go. Brian says anything. Oh, you had the comment right here that Trump was anointed by Jesus to bring about Armageddon. I don't know why I read that, and then yes, that's what they're saying. I don't know if it's true. I don't know if I can wrap my head around that, but I'm going to look into that. We're going to talk more about that tomorrow. And Mr. Parnell, that's a lie. Trump reached out to Iran about a ceasefire, and Iran said no. Maybe. I don't know. Mr. Parnell. What I'm hearing that it's the other way around, but who's to know, right? Who is to know? And Mr. Parnell, Israel put IDF in Iran to start the protest. Well, I don't know about the IDF, but I will agree with you. I know we had Kurdish forces on the ground. We're going to talk about that here in a moment, too. But I know that we had Kurdish forces on the ground who were supplying weapons to some of the protesters for us. Like I said, we use our are proxies as well. Now, from what I understand, the Kurdish fighters are, gosh, these are some good people, men and women. They have a great female force, military force as well, that they are there. This is a tough story because, you hear reports back and forth. You don't really always know exactly what's true. But the story is that we have thousands. I've heard thousands. I don't know how many thousands. Is it 1,000, 2,000? I don't know. Kurdish fighters, combat fighters heading into Iran. Now, I woke up this morning. I woke up at like 3 in the morning. I could not sleep. And I saw some reports where Iran, now this could be propaganda. I don't know. I haven't seen any videos of it. I've only heard word. Iran claims that they ambushed some of those Kurdish fighters coming into Iran and they killed hundreds of them. Now, I don't know if that's true. It's probably not true. The Kurdish fighters are probably, I don't know if they've entered Iran yet. I know some were there allegedly to supply weapons and get the protests going and work out, some of these situations. But we talked about that a long time ago. So that's not really new news. We certainly did make sure that happened with the protests. And let's see. Jay says policy under Obama and Biden is why we are here. It's where we are now. You got that right, Jay. Why we have these issues is exactly that. Because look at Obama. We don't even have to say that Obama, they took that big pallet of cash, to Iran, which is so weird to me because Iran is Shia and Obama and the Democrat regime typically support the Sunni. So it was really strange to me with the Muslim Brotherhood and getting in, step with Iran. But, the Islamic world over in the Middle East is about to implode. I'll tell you that much. And let's see here. Rican Kurds have fought for freedom, not only for themselves, but for the humanity. Yeah, they did. And, and I absolutely love them. I wish them well. I've been praying for them because they are going to save the day as they fought so relentlessly over in Syria against ISIS, side by side with some of our U.S. military members. So the Kurds are fantastic people, and I don't know what's going to happen. They are the boots on the ground for us. They're going in so Americans don't have to. At least that's where it stands right now. It doesn't mean Americans won't at some point have to put boots on the ground, but the Kurds are going in. They're experts at what they're doing. They are fantastic, and they're going to get the job done, whatever that job. I don't know what the job is. From what I understand, it's to get rid of the regime and make that transition take place, where I don't know if it's the old Shah that's going to come in. I don't know what the transition is going to be, but the Kurdish forces are going to come in. There's going to be hand-to-hand combat. It's going to be a very tough situation. They're the right group to handle it, and they're going to make that transition into the new regime is how I'm understanding it. So they are very vital in this position because if they don't do it, we have to do it. And I think that I'm not going to say they're better than us. I don't know. We're probably going to have some of our special ops forces in there with them is my best guess. We won't know that till after, unless somebody reports from it on the ground. We probably won't know how involved we are until later down the road. I hear that we are talking to other groups as well, other militias about coming into Iran as well, putting those boots on the ground. I don't know which militias. We've got, who do we have? We've got the Chechens. I don't think the Chechens are loyal to Russia. I don't know. There's so many of these different groups who are very loyal to certain companies, but at the same time, they're going to go wherever the highest bidder is. Now, you can call me crazy. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't have Al-Qaeda come into Iran and help as well, because Al-Qaeda, of course, is ruling Syria right now. And Al-Qaeda, believe it or not, would love to get rid of the Iranian regime. So who knows who might fight with us? Well, of course, the Syrian name for Al-Qaeda is Al-Nusra. If you recall, Al-Nusra is the terror group that Obama called moderate terrorists. If you ever want to do some homework, you can look up Project Timber Sycamore, and you can see how we funded, armed, trained Al-Nusra because Obama considered them to be moderate terrorists. And of course, they now run the country of Syria. And Jay says, I don't think we should trust the Kurds either. I trust the Kurds wholeheartedly. Dottie says Biden regime tapped into the reserves to keep the gas prices down. Well, they had to do something, Dottie, because the Trump, the Biden administration didn't have anything else going for them. Now, did they? But here's what's interesting. Let's backtrack a little bit. Is we were talking about the missile that was fired into Turkey. It was kind of interesting because NATO has said they're not going to get involved, and now some people in the European Union, this is modern day warfare. Come on, we know where those missiles are coming from. We can track them, right? Even if they turn, there. I guess there's different types of transponders and things, but there's a way to track them. And so we have somebody in the EU who they're all coming forward. And they're like, well, we tracked that missile that came into towards Turkey, and it didn't come from Iran. So where did it come from? I'm gonna play this short video here for you. We'll talk about that for a moment and what this could potentially implicate.
Can also confirm that a Shaheed-like drone which targeted RAF Akrotiri on the 2nd of March, that was the drone that came in at midnight. They are saying that that was not launched from Iran. So that is interesting and significant. They are not giving us any information as yet as to where they think that was launched from. But a drone that hit RAF Akrotiri, that was the one I think that caused damage to the airstrip, did not come from Iran, was not launched from
Iran. Okay, so they're trying to use these drones to cause damage to the airstrips. That's their goal. They don't want our jets to be able to come in and out of these different airstrips. And so this one, NATO had to step in. They launched this drone, or I don't know if it was a drone or a missile towards, I guess it was a drone towards Turkey. NATO had to step up and intercept that drone. And, again, a drone missile, I'm not really sure. But I think she said drone, but I thought it was a missile prior to that. But either way, people are saying that's a false flag. They're saying that a lot of people are blaming Israel, saying that Israel actually launched that towards Turkey to try to get NATO to be involved. I don't know if that's true. I have no way of knowing. We'll never know, or was it Iranian and they just launched it from somewhere else? Who knows? We just don't know. They have those proxies out there. Who knows what they're all up to? So we certainly don't know. Then overnight there was another, and I know I'm going to butcher this word as I always do, but there was an attack in Azerbaijan. I know I'm not saying Azerbaijan. I can say it in my head, but my mouth doesn't form the words right. One of their airports was also struck, I believe, by a drone and caused a lot of damage. So they're going after airports or going after airstrips. Their goal is to make sure we cannot control the skies over Iran. And of course, now they're going to be attacking the French military bases because France is going to allow us to use their airstrip. So that's going to be the next thing we're probably going to see playing out. And, there's a lot that's going to happen. A lot's going to happen. Now we have I didn't even know there was a Grand Ayatollah. So the Grand Ayatollah has now said that they're issuing a fatwa against Donald Trump, of course, Netanyahu, and, the United States and Israel. And we already know that last week they raised the red flag of revenge, or was that on Monday? They raised the red flag of revenge. And, what does that mean? Are there really sleeper cells out there? We're going to talk more about this tomorrow, but are there really sleeper cells out there? Are they just in the wait? We had that terror attack that took place last weekend, and that guy was wearing a shirt that said property of Allah. Underneath that, we haven't talked about this yet. Underneath that shirt he had that said property of Allah, he wore a shirt that had the Iranian flag. So we know it's directly connected to what's taking place in Iran. Are there others? There's a lot of talk out there, a lot of talk that they are planning to strike our power grid, that's their number one goal here in the United States is striking our power grid. Now, that's no surprise to anyone, right? That's no surprise to anyone. But there's a lot of other ways they can get us, of course. A lot of different people, work in our food processing facilities. It wouldn't take much to poison a lot of people. It kind of makes you nervous about what you're doing, what you're eating, and where you're going. But, they could take out the power grid. We're going to talk a little bit more about that tomorrow. And, are you prepared? I think thank you, Tara. Azerbaijan, is that the way to do it? I don't know if you guys used to watch me when I was on the edge, but there's that one general. I cannot say his name for anything. Mac and Ernie. I just cannot say it. I try to say Mac and Ernie. That's about the only way I can get it out. I can do it right in my head, but it does not form out of my mouth for some crazy reason. And Jay says Turkey issued a statement concerning this, so definitely not a false flag. I don't know, Jay. We'll see how that plays out. I don't know. I truly don't know. we're hearing a lot of different stories about whether or not that was a false flag. Did it really come from Iran, or did it not come from Iran? But it could have come from one of Iran's proxies. I don't think anyone is saying that they didn't at least start it. So who knows? But we know that there's a lot of the Middle East is just being torn apart. There's more strikes this morning. Saudi Arabia, Riyadh, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, they're causing themselves a lot of enemies. But think about this. If you're Iranian and you're part of the regime, and your ideology, and this is their ideology, is they want to control that region. They want Islam to be the dominating factor in that region. That's what the ideology is over in that range. Same thing with Hamas, and same thing with the Houthis, and same thing with Hezbollah. That's what their goal is for Islam to control that region, which is, of course, why they want Israel out, of course, and eliminated. And so think about that. If you're the Iranian regime, we just killed your supreme leader, and many other members of your military were launching all these airstrikes against all of your facilities, trying to take out the missiles you spent the past 50 years, 47 years building, and your supply of drones. And you think, you know what, we're on the way out. We're to a point now where there's no going back. We are going to be killed, or we're going to have to go into exile. We could even end up on trial in prison. What are we going to do? And it's more than anything, it's about the ideology of Islam. And I'm not downing Islam. We do enough of that. There's a lot of very good, in my opinion, a lot of good people out there who practice Islam. It's not all bad. I promise you that. It's not all bad. But there are people who are extremists, and there are people who want to control certain regions with Islam. And that's the case, of course, in Iran. And when you think about that ideology, then you've got to realize what's going to happen next. Iran's going to use every single thing in their arsenal, every single thing they have, to make sure that this doesn't happen. And if they had nuclear weapons, I would bet you they'd launch them. They don't have any, thank God. But if they had them, they would be launching them. They're going to give us every single thing they have. And Mr. Parnell, Israel wants to complete control of the Middle East. And Tara says Muslims are not all bad. Islamists, are the issue. Yeah, and Tara, Muslims are not all bad. I have several Muslim friends who hate all of this situation as much as any of us do. And quite honestly, it's true that there are more Muslims killed by Islamic extremism than any other religion. That is absolutely true. So tomorrow we're going to talk about preparation. I've prepared to a tiny degree, because you know what? I don't expect things to happen, but you never know if the power grid goes out. You just don't know. You just don't know. It could happen. For me personally, I went out, I got some flour. I got everything I could to make bread at home. I've already got chicken, so I've got eggs, an egg production facility going on, even though I don't have very many chickens, and I made sure, of course, you always want to have your stockpile of water, some fresh water, or some way to filter your water. On my property, I have a stream. Hopefully it will remain fresh so that we could potentially bottle water up from that stream. It's a lot cleaner than the city water, that's for sure. And so I always feel like if I can make my own bread, I've got plenty of ways to cook outside. I don't need electricity to cook or to survive. I've got dried beans, I've got dried rice, but I'm not telling you to go out and panic buy. Don't do that. But when I went to the store yesterday, maybe it's just my store, and I bought a couple of packs of rice. I got the last 2 packs and dried beans as well. I bought beans and rice, because you know what? If you've got water, you've got beans, you've got rice, you can make your own bread. You've got some chickens with eggs, you're going to be okay. So that's my way of thinking about it. Unless, of course, you have to go on the run. I might as well just die before I go on the run. I'm just going to stay here at my house and fight it out. Not that I expect any of those things to happen. We're going to talk about that tomorrow. We're also going to have to talk tomorrow about Bill Clinton, because I've got to run. I've got some important work things coming through that I've got to attend to. Unfortunately don't have time to wait. And Jay says there are extremely radical Christian groups. They just aren't in charge, like the radical. Oh, yeah. Jay, extremism on any end is bad. On any end. because people will often say to me, oh, do you want the Crusades? No, I definitely don't want the Crusades. No, we don't want any extremist group in charge, no matter who they are. I don't care if they're Christian extremists, Islamic extremists. We just want to be right down the middle, don't we? A little right, a little left, but in the middle range somewhere. All right, guys. Unfortunately, I have to run. I've got some calls coming through. I have to get to work. Very important day today. But anything we didn't cover today, we're going to talk about tomorrow. We're going to jump in tomorrow about should you be prepared? Check those Defcon levels. Like I said, when I came on the show this morning, where the Southern Command and the Southern Command and the North, I believe, was it Northcom? I can't remember. Central Com. We were at a DEFCON 2. We've only been at a DEFCON 2 once in our history, and that was in 1962 during the Cuban Missile Crisis. I just can't say that either. The Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. Now, I expect that DEFCON to go back to 3, but even 3 is pretty high. But think about that. The first time, and since 1962, we've been at a DEFCON 2. So guess what? There's only one level above that, which means nuclear war is imminent. We're never going to get to a DEFCON 1, but still, either way, keep an eye on that. And that's it, guys. I got to run. I got work to do. Thank you all for joining me today. I will be back tomorrow. I'm going to reach out to Colonel Joe Adams, see if he wants to jump in with us tomorrow. I'm sure he's got a whole side of things to say that I know nothing about. We'll see what his expertise has to tell us. Talk about some preparations that you can do just in case they do get to our power grid. You better be prepared. All right, guys, have a good day. I will see you all tomorrow. I'm Tabitha Hassell with Tabs on Tap. Enjoy this beautiful day. I don't think it's going to rain all day, so get out there and enjoy it. Thanks, guys. Have a good day.